And let's get started. There's a attendee, feel free to drop your name in the chat, or just what institution you're from and how familiar you are with Notebook LM. And I guess you can also think about deep research, but we can just focus on Notebook LM at the beginning if you'd like. Do you use it? If so, how do you use it in the classroom, for yourself, for your own research, for your own workflows, just for fun? Good morning, Dawn. Yeah, I mean that's interesting. Like, you know, it's tricky using all these tools when you're Google campus versus a Microsoft campus. A lot of things to consider. All right, so this is the first. I'm going to introduce things and then let Kevin, Abraham, and Bert take over. This is the first show and tell webinar we'll be doing as part of the Spring 2026 Idaho AI Catalyst Initiative. In the fall, we focused on AI foundations for faculty, just how to design courses for in a way that anticipates students using AI, best practices, how to think about academic integrity, stuff like that. As in the spring, we're kind of shifting to just show and tell. Like let's look at some of the tools and practices that our catalysts are using in their own classrooms. I just want to briefly mention that this Catalyst initiative was funded and organized by Heidi Estrom, our Chief Academic Officer at the Idaho Office of the State Board of Education. Our North Star is to empower faculty as we navigate AI readiness. So this is really faculty focused. And in this webinar, we'll show some of what Kevin Brink, Abraham Romney, and Bert Baumgaertner, how they're using NotebookLM and Deep Research. I have the lamest profile, apparently, of those on this slide. And I'll let Kevin, Abraham, and Bert introduce themselves as we move along.
Hello, hello everybody. I'm Kevin Rank. I'm going to be talking about Notebook LM. This is something I've been talking about quite a bit. I've been using it since the very, very, very early days. Back in those days, you could only do, I think it was 10 notebooks, and there was a very limited number of pages you could do at a time. So that is where I started using it, and that's where I've been using it. And I just realized I do not have the slides up. Um,
Would you like me to pull that up for you, Kevin, or do you want to share your
Here,
own
I can
screen?
do it here. I'm going to just share that screen. Whoops. Share the screen over here. Sorry. And because I'm going to be using, um, let's see, sorry. Need to click that. There we go. Sorry, that was the one thing I was missing is having this up. Okay, so let's see. Oops, sorry. Sorry, I'm really struggling here today, aren't I? Sorry, let's see here. Okay, now I think I've got everything. And okay, so yeah, I'm going to be talking about Notebook LM. And I labeled this part Notebook LM, the AI that knows you, not generic AI. You play on Gen AI there because one of the issues that I've run into a lot using regular LLMs is that they are very generic. They're not specific to what I want. And that is where Notebook LM really overcomes that issue. So what I'm going to do is this is going to be mostly showing you how different ways that I've used it or how I am using it. So I'm starting here with some known good uh, information. So I'm going to switch over here to my notebook. There we go, or to this window here. So this is some known good info. I'm happy with this. I like to put all of my sources into a Google Sheet. I used to put them into a Google Doc, but Google or NotebookLM now accepts Google Sheets, and I like the stylized data. I actually put some prompts in to look at sentiment and bias of these, and I will have to find those prompts. I'll add them to the prompts sheet. But I'm just going to grab these links. These are known good links or links that I'm interested in that I've actually been collecting for probably over a year. And that's how I'm going to start this. So I'm starting off with a plain notebook. I have not done anything with it yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is add some sources. And for those that have seen this before, you've probably done this. And I can just paste in all these. And the cool thing about it is that it will take YouTube videos as well as websites. So while it's doing that, I'm also going to have it look for information. So I'm creating slides on AI energy and water usage by data centers. So I'm going to ask it to do some, usually I would do deep research, but I'm going to do fast research just so that I can get some more information. But this is what everything's going to be based on. I try to get some idea or I try to prompt with some general information about let's see about what I'm talking about here. And there we go. So I'm going to have it pull that stuff. So one of the first things I'm going to do after these, and I'm going to just use some examples to show this, is I'm going to look at I wanted to create a table showing each source with its publication date, author credentials. Honestly, this spreadsheet I was showing you, that's how the spreadsheet started. I'd already put these in. And I had originally started, and this is just kind of maybe my workflow. I had originally started with um, uh, Perplexity so that I could get the links and all that as part of it. So I'm put this in just to kind of get an idea of, what is the data that's there. When you do additional research, I think this becomes a lot more important. And you can see where it shows the dates and where that information came from. And from there, and this is a way to just kind of give an early vetting of my information. I'm going to do this one. I'm going to have looking at the sources in here, any areas where they disagree with each other, any clear contradictions or conflicting claims. Let's see here. And I'm going to let that run. And you can see how this will do a lot of vetting for me. And you can also use this. One of the interesting things that I hear a lot is that whenever you create a video overview or an audio overview, you can, or it doesn't tell you what the sources are, where usually this will tell you by clicking here, it will tell you what the source is, where it comes from, all of that. Audio and video overviews, it won't. But what you can do after you've created those is download them to your computer and then re-upload them to as a source, and then use a prompt that will just vet the sources and check that information for you. Let's see here. And that is also in my information. I'm not going to post it, but at the end of the slideshow, there's a list of prompts, and we'll be sharing all these out. So you can actually grab that prompt when the time, or once I'm done here. And then finally, I am going to do one more based on these sources. What important questions or subtopics about the subject are missing or barely covered? Because I think especially when you're doing a controversial subject like AI power usage, AI water usage, it's good to try to get as much information as possible. Try to get that well-rounded knowledge about that. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm covering all my bases here, and that's what I'm doing with this part. And you can see it still is researching websites, and that's on the fast side. So I'm glad that I built at least a little bit of this out so that it will start running. Okay, so I'm going to jump back into the slides here really quick because I want to go on. I want to talk a little bit about using NotebookLM. I'm just kind of giving you guys an idea of the starting point. Oh, and actually, before I go on, I wanted to point out these visualizations, these infographics in the bottom, I generated from basically this data. I did this in one of my classes, and this is what it generated. And I just want to give you an example of what it would look like. So again, this is this is where I'm coming from with this Notebook LM presentation. It's AI that knows you. It's not generic AI. And one of the problems that I run in, and like I said, that I run into with LLMs is it's very broad. You don't, it's hard to focus it at times. And if you do a deep research, it just kind of grabs everything. It's the, Hoover vacuums the internet. And I really want to focus it on information I'm interested in. And that's where Notebook LM comes in. It just pulls from my sources. It is completely grounded in what I'm telling it. It has the advantage when you do that is that it very rarely hallucinates. I'm not going to say it doesn't, it sometimes will, but it's pretty rare. You do probably want to check it really quick, but I've generally found that it does not really hallucinate. I've talked to people that have had issues with that, but usually it's pretty limited because of how it's built out. And it allows a lot of different sources. When I was first using it, it had a few sources you could add, like text files, PDF files, and I think Google Docs, I think was about it. Now you can add videos, you can add audio files, you can add images, which is fairly new, or at least they re-enabled it, web pages, YouTube videos, Google Files, you can do slides, sheets, and docs. The really nice part when you're using those is that you could refresh them, and I really like doing those are my preferred methods of um, or the preferred document formats for me to use. The other thing that you can do is inside of your Google Drive is set it so that when you upload like a PDF file or a Microsoft DocX file, it will convert it to a Google Doc for you, and then you can insert that into the notebook. Again, excuse me, it'll refresh as you go. The added advantage of using Google Drive files is, at least for those of you that are, well, actually, if you're in most LLMs will also use those files. You can upload from those. You can use them in knowledge bases for like a custom GPT or a project. In Google Gemini, it will pull from those if you're building a custom gem. So there's a lot of good uses for using Google Drive like that. Um, so this is from sources to thinking. This is really the real power of Notebook LM, and I really haven't shown that much here. I'm going to go back here, and so some of the stuff I can do just with the information I have, I can build out a mind map. I can create infographics, slide decks. I've got all this different ability. I'm going to actually build out a data table as well. I'm going to start those. But you can take all of this information that you have and start looking at it in different ways. I have had to create an audio overview on a subject, and then that gave me some really good ideas to build out content elsewhere in different ways. All because I took information that I had sources for. I had it create this audio file, and I just found it interesting what they were talking about. And I kind of took that and ran with it. So a bit, I don't know if you're like me, but I save a lot of stuff. Like digitally, I have all stuff all over the place. And Notebook LM allows me, it gives me one place to put it so that I know where it's at. Like it says here at the very bottom, Studio turns these piles of files into a system that thinks with you. You're not looking all over, you know where they're at. And that's one of the ways I also use this. Just on a personal note, I put all of the manuals and stuff for the appliance and stuff around my house into Notebook LM. That way I can query it if I'm looking for something. I can just choose that exact source and then query that. So, oh, and this kind of goes back to that idea there, more from clutter to clarity. You have fewer searches, less rework, stuff like that. Yeah, Bert.
I've got a question for you, Kevin, if that's all
Okay.
right to interject real quick. When you're talking
Yeah.
about the collection of all those sources, one of the things that I find is that I just get this massive list that is alphabetically ordered. And as far as I know, I can't sort of like put them into subfolders or anything like that, especially after the deep research section where it like finds, say, 50 different sources. It just
Yeah.
puts them in that list. Do you have a way of making sure to avoid that kind of clutter, especially if I have certain documents that I want to be the priority for me to easily find?
No, that it is a weakness. So they did have a search functionality for a while. I went to use it a couple of weeks ago and realized it was gone. They This is a work in progress. I've noticed that they will add things and sometimes remove them. A good example is images. You could upload images quite a while ago, and then there was a section time you couldn't upload images. There were some workarounds. You'd upload them like a PDF file, but you couldn't upload them directly, and now they're back again. And I think with adding the deep research, we lost some of that capability. Now, NotebookLM is popular enough. There are uh, plugins for it that will do what you're asking. I've seen some that will actually create a hierarchy. But if you only wanted to use like a uh, specific items, sorry, trying to pop it back up. If you wanted to only use specific items, you can uncheck and just choose what items you want it to do, but that's really the only thing out of the box it will do. So that is a weakness of it, but it other than that, and I would say what you hit on is probably the biggest weakness we need. I wish that there was a way to say, okay, this is a really good source, let's give it a little bit more weight. You can do that as part of prompting. You can say, use this, um, use the information from this specific document heavier, and I've noticed it will generally follow that idea, but not always. It's always a little bit of a game there, so it's a little difficult to do. Um, but yeah, so that again, that's a weakness of it, but that is an issue that I've seen as well. So let me go back to the slides here. Um, let's see. So, and this kind of goes back to the whole idea here. Most of our time isn't spent doing, it's been finding. Again, I have tons of links, I have tons of stuff, but it's hard to find, and putting them in notebooks makes it easier to find. And again, it doesn't replace your judgment at all. It removes the things that get in the way of it. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over here in a second. That's kind of what I'm talking about, but I wanted to show at least a couple of prompts. I'm guessing by now, for those of you that have seen it, you've probably seen all of the different mind maps, what it can do. It will take all of those informations or all that information and put it into some sort of hierarchy like this. I can pull this up. It will give me information about like different kinds of water usage and stuff. And that's just generic. I didn't actually prompt it. I can go in, if there's specific data, I can actually ask wherever these pencils are, you can change it, and I can ask for specific data. I can also change the language, which is kind of nice. If you have students from other countries that maybe speak a different language, the biggest issue there is if you don't know the language, you can't always vet exactly what it's saying. And what I'm going to do, so when I turn it over, I'm going to actually go through some prompts here. And let me grab these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you like a start of here. So I'm going to do this. And again, links to these kinds of things and these prompts themselves are available in this prompting document that I will be sharing out. But like I'm going to start, let's see here, where's my infographic? So I'm going to start with an infographic and just create a couple of prompts just so it gets started here. You can do some pretty basic stuff, like just here's what I want you to look at, and here's maybe some images, or just actually, I'm going to do just a generic one without prompting it. And then here's another one. Or you can actually use JSON prompts. Now, this is one that I downloaded. It's not one that you're maybe going to want to use. It's more structured. Let's see, and here's just another one. And I'm going to actually be firing off a few of these just to kind of show you what this looks like. And once we get to the end of the slideshow, then I can bring this back up and I'll show you what I've been working on, what I've been doing. At the end, I really hope to have a lot of different materials that you might be able to use in a classroom. So with that, I'm going to turn it over for deep research.
All right, yeah, I will interrupt Kevin's tour de force here just to talk a little bit more about deep research. And it's a pretty handy tool if you haven't used it. I'm assuming that a lot of you are familiar with it, but I just wanted to give a couple of points on kind of where it came from and or at least how long it's been around. So what is it? It's basically AI agents that are doing thinking. They're using thinking models combined with retrieval augmented generation to expand your initial query into other areas, and you can kind of specify, where you want it to find those sources, if it's academic or other types of sources. They each all the larger foundation models now have deep research, most for the most part. OpenAI, Gemini, Perplexity, and each of these function a little bit different. The first one, if I unless correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the first one to the table with a specific deep research tool was Gemini 2.0, and it still remains the deepest, let's say, in my experience of testing these. Although I haven't looked at Anthropic's deep research, so some of you have experience with that. But what it does is it will pull a lot of sources and do some work for you in a sense in finding sources and some strengths. It's really fast, as we've already seen a little taste of even with the fast research, but the deep research is a lot faster than going through and finding sources in traditional ways. It keeps a trail of where it found those sources, and it's pretty good at identifying gaps in literature. Now, it's also very confident sometimes at identifying those gaps. So sometimes you could get false citations. Sometimes you get a bias based on what it has access to. So Google's Gemini is going to search the internet using Google search and Google Scholar sources and those kinds of things. So it's going to have that, but it won't be able to get behind paywalls necessarily. And you still need to verify, obviously, where the sources come from. So my thoughts on teaching students to research using this is that I think it's a pretty useful tool for exploring topics, refining questions, and they still need to verify their citations, something to think about early. I think it's something that could prompt deeper learning rather than just avoiding it. And of course, we have the same issues with false citations. And I think especially this idea of passive research. I mean, we're seeing how quickly Kevin can put together sources to really, process those sources would take a lot of time and reading. I think this can be a tool that can help us to make our research and reading more effective. And if we use it that way, I think it can be pretty helpful. So this is what it looks like in Gemini. It's one of the tools that's available, deep research. And there's a little bit of a difference between the way that Gemini and, say, ChatGPT work with this. When you initially do deep research in ChatGPT, it will ask you for some feedback as to whether or not how you want to proceed. And I find that to be kind of helpful. Sometimes the questions it asks are not as helpful, but like number three, would you like AI generated examples? Probably not, right? But at least it's asking me so I can clarify that I want it to find real materials. And this is what it looks like in deep research in Gemini. It gives you a research plan, and you can edit that plan if you're not satisfied with it. So this is something that I actually wanted to just highlight, and I wanted to highlight it because unfortunately it's not available when we get to the back to NotebookLM here. This part isn't shown in NotebookLM. I found it really interesting actually while it's doing the research to view its thinking. Here I've identified a potential gap in how these tools are labeled within academic literature. Sometimes the thinking in Gemini is actually really helpful in getting some ideas about different field terminology and keywords that I might search on my own. So I find that really helpful. And I also like that it's not just a black box. I can see what's happening when it's trying to research, and it will show me all the sites that it's looking for. So in NotebookLM, deep research we've already seen a little bit where you could use fast or deep research. And I tried it on this example, and it gives a little bit of a report initially when you do deep research. It actually creates a report much like it does in Gemini, and it will embed that report with its sources for you as one of the documents in your notebook. And then you can see all the other sources. And before you import them, there's this little button here where you can see the little box with an arrow out. If you click on that, you can actually see the source. And I wanted to just point that out because it's in my experience that can be something that's really helpful to see the sources before you just put them all into your notebook and clutter your notebook with sources that may or may not be good. For example, I was looking for a specific source and it pulled a scholar's CV that cited that source as one of the works that they had done, but it wasn't actually the source itself. So you want to make sure that what it's finding is the actual source that it's saying it is before you actually import it into your notebook and trust it. So that's a really helpful little button. And I wish that they always kept that there, but once it's imported, you can click and view it within Notebook, but you can't actually go back to the source in the same way. So key thing to do if you're doing deep research in NotebookLM is before you import those, it's useful to check those sources to make sure you're getting what you want. And sometimes it will find sources and then for whatever reason it can't pull them. It looked like some of those sources I was looking at were just there was a website problem on one of them where it just wouldn't load the page. The website was down. So you can remove the ones that didn't work, but you might want to take note of them if they're useful and you can try to find them somewhere else. Okay. So that's kind of what I wanted to share there. And if people have questions as Kevin goes on and stuff, I might interject a little bit about some ideas about deep research, but I find that it can be pretty helpful in getting, like I said, sources that I wouldn't have found. Sometimes it's helpful in kind of feeling out a disciplinary field that's a little bit different from what I'm used to, and I can kind of get a sense of the terminology there. And then when you put it back into, oh yeah, Kevin did talk a little bit about this. You saw some of the prompts that Kevin was using on his sources. That's a helpful thing you can do once you've done deep research. You import those sources and you can make specific queries about how to about the sources themselves. So you can even ask which ones are cited the most within your collection, which ones cite each other. And so sometimes you'll see that some of the sources that are found might rise to the top as the ones that are cited the most within your collection, which is kind of a neat thing that it can do. And I wanted to share just one other thing before we get back to there. I'm going to share. I think I need to change my share though. Okay, sorry. This was one I wanted to share. Okay, so this screen here, you can see that there's a, I'll go back to where I got to this. When I'm in the chat here, I can click on this configure notebook button. And Kevin may mention this a bit, but this custom option is really nice. I mean, it gives you some examples, customize, respond as at the PhD student level. You can give it, you can play with this and give it kind of really specific prompts. Like one of them I tried is, you're a postdoc researcher in this particular field. And sometimes it just creates a certain kind of attitude, I guess, in the way that it responds, but that can be kind of helpful to move away from just the generic responses. So I'll let you move on to Bert talking about visualization.
Thanks, Abraham. Um, yeah, what I'd like to do is just use or show you a little bit how I iterate through some of these things in Notebook LM, right? We just mentioned the dangers of sort of like passive research. And one of the things I wanted to do is sort of like just demonstrate ways in which I purposely like inject myself into this process and how I sort of iterate through some ideas. So in general, I typically have the following sort of like framework in mind. Pausing to ask myself, what is it that I think? And I spend some time writing that out, either as a prompt or maybe I've written an entire paper draft for this, right? Pause, what do I think? And then be like, okay, now help me get some kind of like feedback or see what others have said and just keep iterating through that process, right? Now that I've gotten some other information, what is it that I think again, right? Is that will lead me into thinking about more prompting or more writing. So one way I want to show you how I've done this I have this course that I've been working on that is actually combining some things in decision theory, for which I've written a text in the past, an open source text, and some game theory tools that I was hoping to incorporate into a new sort of hybrid course. So I've put as my sources here on the left, you have this like Baumgartner decision theory PDF, the one that I've written, and then I also have this other decision theory book that includes game theory called Weatherson. And so what I did was put those in as my sources and then talk about a particular week, a lesson plan that I have. We're going to be drawing on certain parts of that source. And one of the things that I realized I wanted to do was introduce students to these like tree structures instead of just tables. And I myself never actually created any of those kinds of visualizations. I know they exist, and it can be a pain in the butt to do it. And so I'm like, ugh, how much time do I want to spend making those visualizations as opposed to going back to thinking about my lesson plans and so on. So I put here in the chat, right, the topic for this week, and then I'll say what the tool is. The basic tool will be taught in the basic decision matrix. And I'd like to supplement this normal form with the decision tree equivalent. And so please help me develop that. So what I'm getting it to do is basically develop the decision tree version of that. And then I get this response from Notebook LM. And I look that over, I check the sources to see like, okay, it's grounded in the things that I had put up. And then I can actually save that as a note. And when you save that as a note, that itself will become a source that you can draw upon, which can be really, really helpful as you're sort of iterating through this. So I've saved that as a source, and you can see here visualizing decisions, normal and extensive forms. And then over here on the right, there are these options like an infographic or slide deck that you can then also have specific instructions that both Abraham and Kevin had mentioned. And so I can there iterate the importance of what I want to have, like having a decision matrix on one side and the equivalent version of the decision tree on the right. And here's one example of how it actually then, oh, sorry, that's the note. Sorry, that's not the visual. Um, I'll make this bigger. Sorry, I want to make this. There we go. So what it now did was using the source note that I had created from the two texts that I had grounded in, I wanted to use examples that I already had there. I didn't want to use made up examples, but I did want to use other knowledge that might be part of the internet in terms of like how one describes these types of things to students to create this kind of slide deck for me. And so, sure enough, it has these like really wonderful ways of like categorizing the different important things from the table using actual examples, and then sort of walks through step by step how to actually create the decision trees. And so this I found to actually be really helpful for students to see how to actually incorporate that. And that would have taken me a long time myself. So I saved a huge amount of time in generating that kind of visual. And it's again grounded in things of like what I think and what I want the students to be able to learn from. The other thing I wanted to demonstrate, I don't know if anybody uses LaTeX to do some kind of visualizations, especially when it comes to producing like publication level visuals. One of the downsides of the kinds of visuals that get made here is they're not sort of compartmentalized, right? So if you want to make any kind of edits to the whole thing, you have to give instructions that like then changes the global features of that. And that can be quite annoying when what you want to do is tinker with different kinds of component parts. On the other hand, if you've used things like LaTeX or other kinds of visuals that aren't like what you see is what you get, but instead you're describing either in code or in LaTeX instructions for how to generate an image, they can be extremely cumbersome. And especially if you've used LaTeX and you've tried to make visuals using what's called ticks, the ticks package. You'll see here on the left, I have to specify the various kinds of coordinates, what exactly needs to be drawn, those coordinates, what those nodes are, and so on, to generate an image that looks like this here on the right. And I've, I, when I had more time in graduate school, I did this sort of thing. But as a faculty member, I just don't have the patience anymore to like get to that kind of level of detail. So the other way that I've used sort of deep research and Gemini for this is to actually iterate through these kinds of visualizations by giving these sort of like broad instructions of what I want. And then it'll not generate the image for me, but it'll actually give me the code that I can use and copy and paste into LaTeX and then generate this. So for example, in Gemini, sorry, I'm going to the top, I have these instructions that I'm giving it where I'm saying I have some of these plots, and now what I want to do is give it specific instructions for what I want to have revised in those existing plots and to give me the code so that I can tinker with it myself. So I even will tell it things like, look, this is going to be tricky, so please ask follow-up questions if needed. On the left, I want to show this kind of matrix. And then on the right, I want to show these other kinds of matrices. And so it does some thinking. It tells me what it wants or what it thinks that I want. It gives me the TIX code. And then I go over and I put it into LaTeX to generate the PDFs of it. And what I get is this kind of visualization now. And there's issues with it, right? There's like these overlapping matrices over top of these arrows that I find annoying, and I can do one of two things. I can tell Gemini this about this issue, or I can also just play around with it myself. And if anybody's played around with ticks, it can be, again, a pain in the butt because you tinker with one little thing and then all these other things like wreak havoc and you don't get the visualization what you want. So I just told Gemini, I complained to it and said, the matrices on the right side overlap with the middle arrows. Please push them further to the right and feel free to push a middle bit leftwards since we don't need as much space from the left example. And then it tells me what it did. It gives me the new bit of the code snippet. And sure enough, it fixed it. And the thing that I find extremely impressive is as long as you're in that same context and you're iterating through what it is that you need, it does a pretty darn good job of creating really, really complex illustrations. So my final version of this looks like this, where I have three different subfigures with different captions and different images generated by that TIX package. So this is another way that I've been using at least Deep Research and Google's Gemini to take some of these source documents and visualizations and not just generating the sort of generic visuals that you have inside the infographic or slide deck features like we do over here in the studio part, but actually trying to then refine that in ways that I have a lot more control over and so that I can also then customize it. Kevin, I think it's time to go back to some of your outputs that you were waiting for from NotebookLM.
Okay, so let me reshare my screen here. Okay, so let's go back here and go back to the right notebook here. So I still have a couple. I kicked off a few others, but you can see after I switched out, oh, but you guys are not seeing that. There we go. Hope so. I click share. As you can see, I've got a huge list here now of items that I've started creating. And this could be used all sorts of ways in a class. I already showed you the breakdown of the Google Sheet, but we can actually look at some of these images as well. Now, all these infographics are going to pull from the same sources. So you're probably not going to want to use like all of them, but I'm pulling these up just to kind of show you how with using the prompt, I can totally change the look and the feel. Oh, that's okay. I was like, that was weird. Okay. You can totally change the look and feel of what it produces. So it's not always going to be that generic, oh, that's a NotebookLM image or infographic, because when you do this, you get these very different results depending on the prompt that is used. I'm just kind of quickly going through these. And I can share out this notebook so you can see there's all sorts of different versions. I'll just go through this one. I'm just going to see here. So like I can see there is an issue right here. So I'd probably want to regenerate this. Oh, and that actually reminds me a little bit of knowledge here. So you can create different levels of detail when you're creating your infographics. You create them in landscape, portrait, square. You can make them concise, standard, or detailed. Don't use detailed. I've found that it does a really good job. They look really good, but when you dig into them, like I just did, and you saw that little problem with the wording, in my experience with detailed, it starts out good, and by the end, you get a lot of gibberish. So until they take it out of beta, I would probably avoid it or use it sparingly. I have also built stuff in detail that was really good, and I just used Photoshop to clean up the wording. I've seen one workflow I've seen is people will take it into, I want to say Canva, and it will break it into a slideshow at that point. And they've got a tool that allows you to basically do image to text, and then you can edit the text that way. So there are ways of getting around it. They're still a little funky, but there are ways. And I will say this too, from what they've said online, they are working on creating an export to Google Slides, not just PDF, when you are creating a slide deck. So that'll be nice as well. Okay, so let me go here. Let's look. So you can see like there's very, very drastic differences in how these look, and it's all based on that prompt. You can specify like what area you want it to do, how you want it to, or what you want it to concentrate on, stuff like that. And this is another thing that I did. So this is using the prompt. I asked it. Actually, here, let me show you. Let me show you the workflow on this one. As you can see, there's this here. I said, create a visual timeline from 2010 to projected 2040. Turn this into a source. Only the I'm not sure. I think it's actually oh, those are my notes. Whoops, I did not need that part. Just create a visual timeline from 2010 to projected 2040. And it actually followed those instructions. I think it ignored the other part because from there, what I did with NotebookLM, anything you prompt in the middle, you can click Save to Note, which I did over here. You can see that's that text. So I created a note and whoops, actually I should not close that. One of the problems when you put a lot of stuff in here, it gets really long over here. Okay. You can convert to source, and that's what I did here. So that's that there. And then what I did is I unchecked all of this, just leaving that one checked. I created that infographic, and you can see underneath it, I only used one source. Now, I think something went wrong. I will just a little side here. I think something went wrong. I'm doing a fast research. When I do deep research, it never takes this long. So either something is broken or basically something's gone really wrong. I don't know
Never-
what's going on here.
Just reload the page. I find every once in a while it
Oh,
gets
really?
stuck, and if I reload the page, it's like all done.
Oh,
It's a bit strange sometimes.
yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't finish, and I don't want to have to wait for that. So there you go. There's a fix for that. Oh, that's annoying. Um, But yeah, so by just choosing one source, that timeline, I had this builded out on the timeline and it creates a nice infographic timeline of what is happening with the whole AI and water. Now I the plan on this was to actually bring in more sources to make this more rounded. I think this is a good starting place, but I really do think you need more sources. And oh, here, let me show you. I actually did this in my class, and you can see that I've got a lot more information in here. And I think that helps create more visualizations um, that we can use. Let's see here. Yeah, and I was actually testing this last night on some of these. I was just trying to find one of the better looking ones. There we go. So I think that one's a little bit more fun to look at. So this is using more sources. On these, I will admit I did not vet the additional sources. So I'm not going to claim they're all perfect. From a workflow, what I would do is I would find some that I'm happy with, either use Perplexity. Honestly, I've used Perplexity for search. Go through and check the sources, make sure you like them, put them in as sources into NotebookLM. Again, I like to put them into a table as well with like the name of the article, who it's from, the date that it was published. So I have that. So I capture that as well. I just find starting with that kind of information just helps overall how well it works. So I would start there, add those to your sources, have a good like a deep research prompt for it to find more sources. Then you can go through and vet those, and then once you have them in there, you can actually click on them, and I can click this button, and it will pop it out. Okay, so this is the White House thing. And you can actually see what it is. So you can also, so that helps you vet the sources. And it also gives you this little AI synopsis of what you're talking about. And just to show you, so if that spreadsheet showing the sources, if I go into this, I can click to sync with Google Drive. So if I make updates to it, I can keep them up to date. Again, that's the reason why I love using Google Drive files, because if I wanted to update this, you can see I can't. I If they change it, I'd have to go to the site, copy the link, go back, delete that one, and then re-add it. So that is one of the big reasons I really like using Google Drive. Okay, so let's,
Kevin,
yeah.
does that mean if you host a PDF on Google Drive and you bring that and you bring that into a notebook and then you modify it on Google Drive, it'll sync the changes?
No, it only syncs Google Sheets, Google Docs, and Slides. What you
Mm.
can do is there's a setting inside of Google Drive that when you upload certain files, and I believe, or if you maybe open them like a PDF file, it, I think you can, I don't have PDF in here. You can convert it into a Google Doc. Doesn't work for all of them. If it's one of those PDF files that are essentially a big image, it's not going to help much for that. But if it actually is a document that it can pull all the information out of, it can convert that into a Google Doc, and then you can update that instead of the PDF.
But then what I'm hearing is that is an automatic sync. Like if I do work in Google Docs and it's already in a Notebook LM
Yeah.
space, is that automatically going to refresh within the space, or I have to like pull the refresh,
You
or
have
I
to
have to
pull the refresh.
manually?
Actually, I just
Gotcha.
realized I did not add this. Let me add that in there. So to use that, that might be too fresh. Yeah, it has to have that little icon, and because it was just added, it's not letting me, but there's a click to refresh. Usually that'll be there. So yeah, it freezes wherever you're at, which I would consider both a good thing and a bad thing, depending on what your use case is. But let's see if it's, yeah. I I don't know if it will know if it's changed or not. But yeah, it will stay it'll set it in stone where you have it. And then if you want to update it, you can update it. So, like I said, I can see that being both good and bad depending on your use case. Um, but you can see I've done all these different images. I've done let's see here. I think it was this one here. Let me see. So, oh, also in here, you see where it says show prompt. Yeah, so that's the simple one. That's not it. What I did is I also asked it to create like a module. I'm trying to find which one of these I did that on. At least I thought I did. Let's see here. You can also get to, well, oh, that's not it. You can also get over here to the prompts. And the other issue is that once you start them, it's not you have to wait until it's done generating to rename them, and I've found that that can be a problem. That's the one I wanted. Um, I hope that was the one I should look at. Yeah. So the idea here is that it takes all my sources and will create a Canvas module that you could, in theory, paste into Canvas whole cloth. It's got the information that you would want to add. Now, this is a very generic prompt. I'm just saying, like, here's how to give it, here's keep it accessible for students, stuff like that. I say give the students a good rundown of what's occurring. If I was building out a an actual Canvas module and doing this not in a simulation, I would specify like the parts that I'd want to have in that module. And you could actually do multiple modules, say, okay, in this one, I want this information, generate another one with different forms of information. Again, what you use in the prompt will dictate what the output is. So it's very good at following what you put in those prompts to modify the behavior. And then again, I've got these other ones out here. This is like a policy framework that it put together. And what I find is sometimes the generic reports, and here, I'm having to refresh it. So what it will do, it will always give you these four. Create your own is what I used for the Canvas one. It'll create a study guide, blog post, briefing doc. I also generated those two. I'm waiting for these, but here we go. Strategic framework was the one I was just showing you. Analytical handbook, that's a new one that wasn't there before. So you've got different ones, and it's based on what your sources are. It will come up with these suggested formats, and they're basically just a prompt. And it dynamically creates those. Like what I saw a little bit ago was not the same for. That strategic one was, but the other ones I think were different. So you can look at these in different ways. I can also look at slide decks. It creates a slide deck. And I can go through this, and I think it does a pretty good job. Again, they are talking that this will, that they're trying to develop a way to export this instead of just into a PDF file. It will export into Google Slides as well. So I am really looking forward to that. Let's see here. You can build out flashcards and quizzes automatically. You can see the answer. I can actually have it explain it. If I click explain, it basically turns that, my mouse is not letting go. It turns that into a prompt and will generate that, generate information from that. Oops, let you go away. I can build out a quiz and it gives me hints. I really don't know what some of these answers are like that. So yeah, so this is the answer, a very verbose, holy cow, very verbose answer to what this question was, what that flashcard was. And the other thing is that you can create audio files. This was to the debate. This is what made it go viral, last year, was the ability to create these. I'm going to jump forward a little bit. Wow, created 21 minutes. I didn't expect that. Oh yeah, it doesn't. Sometimes it struggles if you move it forward. Let me download it. There we go. Or not.
Wire infrastructure.
There we go.
Intelligence and energy have been the fundamental limiters of human progress for what? 10,000 years. We are about to make them abundant. And if we have to build a few thousand miles of high voltage transmission lines and strip away some bureaucratic reviews to get there, the ends abs.
So I made this a little unhinged. You can kind of have fun with this. So if you want to kind of model like different kinds of attitudes people might have in discussing these topics, you can actually use this you can really tweak these to make them sound kind of unhinged. So again, they believe in it 100%, or one side is all in on AI. They believe in it 100%, blah, blah, blah. The other side, basically the same thing for the other side. Neither participant particularly likes each other. They are grudgingly working with each other on this debate, and also say both are also pretty unhinged in general. By doing that, it makes it kind of fun, but it also gives you that real drastic opposing viewpoints, and you can hear people, maybe not people, but you can hear the simulated person going, as basically a caricature of that personality on, what they believe in on one side or the other. So you can have fun with that. I'm showing a fun one because most people, when they build these out, they're pretty boring. They'll do some minor tweaks. I'm just showing kind of that extreme. And I have seen online, NSFW ones, which I would not use for this. But some people have gotten kind of crazy in building these audio prompts out, and if you want to play with that. And the last one is the video, which I think it's this one here. Yeah.
Land, power,
There we
and
go.
of course, cooling. So let's talk pros. Supporters see a future with tons of smart, cheap intelligence. What's not to like? The potential gains are just huge, promising to make pretty much every part of our lives better. Take Quincy, Washington. After data centers moved in, the poverty rate was cut by more than half. Okay, but now for the cons. All this progress comes at a cost, raising some very serious concerns. These things are seriously power hungry. We're talking
So as part of the prompt there, I said, give me a quick overview on the arguments pro and con, so you can see where it's pulling those out. Here's the pro, here's the con, and that's what I was trying to show with this, where you can ask it to concentrate on both sides, and it will generate this video or the audio. Honestly, most of the different ways you can have it generate both sides. So that's another interesting, in my opinion, interesting use case of that. So I think something like this, you could do a lot of class prep using NotebookLM. And again, it's using just my sources. It's not using all the sources out there. It's just using mine. And I wanted to show one other thing here. So this is inside of Google Gemini. For those of you that are using Gemini, they've got what are called gems. Gems are basically like a custom GPT or custom bot. You put the source in it. And as of yesterday, we can now use in our knowledge base, we can now add a notebook LM as our source of knowledge. Now I'm using two different accounts here, so I can't actually add that in there, but I can give it a name, I can give it a description, give it some instructions or basically a prompt what I want it to do, and then again use my notebook LM as the notebook for the basis. Let me see what I've got in here. So
Kevin,
this is
we're about out of time.
okay.
Just giving you a
Oh yeah. So there
reminder
you go.
about the
So
time.
that's another use case. And that's really all that I have for everything. Um, I guess that we can take some questions that any have not been answered.
This
Because
is
yeah,
really
this
awesome. I mean, I actually learned quite a bit. I wasn't sure. Like I've used Notebook LM, and I think all my courses now that I teach, I have Notebook LM spaces, but this takes it like far beyond what I'm currently doing. So I learned a ton. Yeah,
okay.
there's questions
Yeah.
around like available for student. I know this is like an issue, if you want to stick around and troubleshoot this, but I know there's questions around, who has access to what, all, whether or not student accounts. I know you've kind of faced this at BSU, like depending on the type of account, what they have access to.
In my experience, student accounts don't provide the ability to share well. I had an assignment, but that's no, not notebook. Um, I had an assignment 2 weeks ago, having students build it out, and when they shared it, it would not work. So what happens when you're sharing from an education version is you have to specifically say what groups they are. And at Boise State, they uh, the students are on a separate network than the professors. So I don't know if that is universal or how it's set up. I know we had some folks from uh, Google here about a year ago in one of my brown bags, and they were saying that our setup is a little unique, and I think that's what causes it. That I don't think in all universities there's that just hard line difference between where students can share to professors. At Boise State, they really can't. And that is one of the biggest reasons, that I am using my personal account, which I've lost my notebook here.
Bert and Abraham, how do y'all handle this? You just share the entire notebook space or what?
No, I'm still a little bit traditional in that like I will give them slides or some outlines. But in the class, I'm typically like we just do visual presentations, or sorry, we do chalk talks. So the students, I'm encouraging them to do handwritten notes to try to internalize this type of stuff. And so I'm using it more on my end to produce, I think, resources that are gonna be much more sort of, yeah, um, concise and mindful,
Mm.
right, in terms of what I do. Just because, I mean, you can kind of see, you made a comment earlier, like the proliferation of sources and things like that is kind of crazy, and I think that is not good for students. So I try to curate as much as possible, and then just give them those sources to start with.
I mean, that's fascinating to me because this is like these are like pedagogical decisions, right? Like, why share the entire space versus share certain artifacts versus like maybe it's just a prep resource, you know?
Yeah, I think
So,
that's really interesting. I mean, the copyright issue that was talked a little bit in the chat was part of why I haven't shared, because if I'm loading a textbook or something in there, that that it is copyrightable. I don't know if that's something that would violate copyright, or even just library sources that technically they should be downloading themselves, that kind of thing. But it's an interesting question.
Yeah,
yeah,
no.
so I did want to point out, like, if you are having students take notes, with by hand, you can technically use Notebook LM to have them take pictures, insert into a notebook, and it will convert them into text. Or you can ask
That's
it to.
And that's exactly what I tell them to do. I tell them like there's some good reasons for actually just making your own diagrams, writing things for yourself because it helps with the internalization. But you should never. And the cool thing is, if you're like, yeah, but then I have to like type it out afterwards. Like, no, you don't. Just take a picture and it will transcribe it for you, right? So it removes that barrier, that reason for doing it. So yeah. And outside of class, I encourage them to use this kind of tool, right? So I think U
Mhm.
of I can't remember if it's U of I specifically or if it's just in general for students, but they can use their student accounts to get a notebook, like to get the Gemini Pro account for a year. And so they can access it if they want to, right? But I'm not requiring students to do it because I also want to be mindful that some students have some ethical concerns by it, and I want them to have that option to exercise that as well.
Yeah. I want to point out over here. So this is on my personal account. On the academic account, on the academic version, this also is true for students. They don't get this one right here. They don't have this viewer, or yeah, this one here, where you can set it to anyone with a link. It only works on, well, I don't know if it only works, but it works on a non-institutional version, which I'm assuming at this point would be any EDU or any like enterprise account. So a personal account this works on. So I can say anyone with this link, they can get access to the full notebook, or I can basically hide all of the sources and they can only chat with what is there. So this is what that would look like. So that is another way to, if you're sharing it, again, you have to do it from a personal account, not a school account. But if you build it out, you can actually use it um, to create this chat that doesn't allow the students to see where everything comes from. It just gives them that interface. So that's another way when you're sharing it to think about, or a way to share it out.
It's been so great. But thanks, Kevin, Abraham, Bert. It's really awesome. We'll follow up. I guess you can show the last slide, but we have resources. We'll follow up after with a link to the survey, just if you have any feedback. But appreciate y'all and reach out if you'd like to see, if you have a topic you'd like to see more on. But hopefully this is helpful for figuring out what you want to do in your own classrooms. And if you have a
Sure.
Substack, if anyone has like a Substack they want to broadcast or include on this slide, let me know. Sorry, Bert, go ahead.
I'd love to see those too. It's like the anybody's Substack.
To answer, Kaywen was asking about if they have access to if they can ask where the information is sourced. I think that's kind